Here's an old legend from North Louisiana. By now maybe it's spread around Texarkana, but judging by my company, I'd say it ain't made it north of Georgia. Story about a man with some blue coveralls, the sleeves ripped off in a southern drawl, and most of the time he had a cigarette between his teeth. Above his heart was an American flag, and on the opposite breast was a dirty name tag. In faded letters you could barely read. It said Keith. His ma called him Bobby and his daddy called him Joe, but it caused some confusion when they was calling the roll. So one day they just went and put them both right there together. He's a good old boy. About country he was manic, but he wasn't too keen on all that widespread panic, so it wasn't long till he introduced us all to hippie hunting. He'd seek out one of them congregations having some kind of free will celebration, and he'd run them out of town much quicker than they'd moseyed in. Come home tired and ready for bed with homemade hula hoops and dreads, and he'd hang them above the mantel because that's where he kept his trophies. It worked out fine till the faded night. He was walking around Spearsville Park and the moon was bright, and he stumbled upon some of them long-haired types in a circle. There's a little gal in there, and he thought she was pretty. While he believed patchouli belonged in the city, couldn't get over this feeling that was creeping right up on him. Well, her skin was fair and her hair was red. She was singing along to the Grateful Dead. The only thing Bobby Joe was grateful of that night was her. He tried to cause a fuss and run him away, but before he could, she'd convinced him to stay, and a little time passed, and she threw some juju beads around his neck. He had an arm tattoo that said, "Born to Die." Under that, she drew a butterfly. It made him feel funny when she put a yellow flower behind his ear. So somewhere in the midst of this situation, Bobby Joe let go of all his frustrations and decided to himself to amend his relations with his new friend's kind of people. So the night led on, as one might think, till the red-haired gal offered Bobby Joe a drink, and he slugged the whole cup and just passed smooth out. Well, it turns out because of his late-night vocation, the boy had earned himself quite a reputation, and them hippie folks had lured him out there and just set up a trap. So Bobby Joe awoke, hanging from a tree, out on a limb, over a creek. Thought I'll give them that. They are resourceful little buggers. He didn't know how they'd hung him so high. He just knew he had to escape or die, and he jammed his hand into his boot, but they'd stole his best knife. So now the predicament, well, it was getting pretty bad, and the loss of his Crenshaw, that made him kind of mad, and then he thought of that little red-haired gal and got sad she deceived him. He gathered up his gumption and all of his grit, and with 24 years of tobacco spit hardening his teeth, he chewed right through the rope. So he started to drop and he let out a holler, fell quite a ways before he hit the water. In a couple of seconds he was wheezing on the grass of the bank. When they got Bobby Joe, them hippies must have drove 10 miles, kicking up dust down an old country road before they hung him over that creek. body and gave some resistance. His 10-mile walk is a hell of a distance. So when he arrived back in town, I couldn't tell if he was mad or in line. But he told me this story, but he didn't say much. He just went on home and gathered some stuff and walked off into the horizon. That's the last I saw of Bobby Joe Keith. Some say he's dead, but hell I doubt. I'd like to think he's out there, staking it out in the woods on another one of them midnight prowls for tree huggers. That's why sometimes, right before I dream, when the moon's high and the night's serene, and I think I hear a hippie scream, I just smile and ease off to sleep.